Hey guys, Paul Wilson here. Excuse me for another e-learning live stream. Thanks for joining today. I'm looking forward to this one today. This is going to be pretty interesting stuff. We're going to be talking about troubleshooting mobile responsive design, specifically fluid box responsive design in Adobe Captivate 2019. There is, of course, some news that I want to share with you before we get into that right now. So let's just switch over to my desktop and take a look at a couple things I just want to make sure everyone's aware of. Obviously, the ongoing Adobe Captivate Specialist Certificate Program is happening all over North America, of course. The next sessions that are coming up are going to be Washington, D.C. on September 9th. And I don't have the location details here yet. They haven't posted them on the Captivate section of adobe.com. But there is the Toronto session, which is going to be in my backyard. That's going to be September 11th, 2019. And that's going to be at the Weston Harbor Castle, I think they call it, right downtown Toronto. So if you're available or in the Toronto area or in Ontario, and you're interested in the Captivate Specialist certification, Toronto is a good opportunity for you. There's also going to be some upcoming sessions after that. Las Vegas, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. And we also have Seattle, New York, and Chicago throughout October as well. So kind of exciting to see that this program has been expanded. You guys have been asking for it since it came out, because obviously Vegas and Washington, D.C. aren't the only two places in North America. A lot of us don't have the ability to travel, or we don't have the budget for it. So, it's great that Adobe's offering it in additional cities. Now, speaking of Las Vegas, what we have coming up, of course, is the Adobe Learning Summit. And there's a lot of details there that are now available, so you can check that out. If you go to learningsummit.elearning.adobeevents.com. Pretty easy to find, though, if you don't memorize that. Every time I need this page, I just do a Google search for Adobe Learning Summit 2019, and you'll find it. It'll be in the first 3 or 4 hits on that. It's going to be at the Las Vegas Mirage Hotel. It's October 3rd. Now, if you also want to do the Adobe Captivate Specialist certification, that's going to be the day before. So October 2nd, come and do your Captivate Specialist certification. Now, something to be aware of course, is that when you attend a Captivate Specialist certification that coincides or co-located would be probably a better word to use with some form of e-learning conference that Adobe puts on, they offer a discount. So rather than the regular $799 US, you can come to this workshop for $499. And just to give you an idea of what this includes about 2 weeks prior to the event itself. This is truly a blended learning solution. You'll receive access to log in and complete a series of videos, about 7 hours worth of videos, if I'm not mistaken. And along with that are going to be some project files that you can work through. If you are taking the specialist certification, I strongly encourage you to make sure that you're doing this pre-work. If you do the pre-work and you come and you're eager on the day of the training itself, and you work through the exercises that I and the other instructors will provide for you, I can almost say with 100% assurance that you'll be successful in getting your certification. It's been my experience that the folks that were not successful, that didn't really prepare for the event, that's the ones who weren't able to pass the assessment at the end. But, it's a really great opportunity. One of the things that I always say about this is that the next time you're sitting across from your potential hiring manager for a new job in e-learning and they're looking for Adobe Captivate skills and knowledge, nothing beats having a certification, especially one like this, because it's verifiable through Credly, cred.ly. And so, the potential hiring manager can go to that site and confirm that, yes, Paul Wilson is Adobe Captivate Specialist, certified. And that is worth its weight in gold as far as I'm concerned, because that's always the question, right? Oh, you've written down that you know Adobe Captivate. Well, how well do you know Adobe Captivate? Can you build e-learning that includes virtual reality? Can you build e-learning that includes responsive design, and so on? So, I really encourage you that if you want to come to Vegas, the Vegas sessions are great because you'll get the second day, which includes all of the various activities. You'll see all these different learning tracks. The session that I'll be doing is in the advanced track. It's going to be on mobile learning using ready-to-go slides and fluid boxes. I'll be touching on some of that knowledge today, but this is a whole new presentation that I'm going to be doing, and it's focused on the ready-to-go slides and projects that are now available in Captivate 2019 version 11.5. So you'll get real good hands-on experience with that. There's also going to be some stuff on multimedia. There's a beginner's track if you're just getting started. And while they, don't have the details yet, there's going to be some additional sessions. As we get closer to the event, those will get rolled out. You can get more specific detail from the program info. The format's pretty much the same as it always is. We're going to start off with registration and breakfast. Breakfast is included. The actual summit itself, the Adobe Captivate Specialist is $4.99, but the conference itself is completely free. So you come for 2 days, you really only pay for one. You're going to get breakfast and lunch both days. Breakfast is included with even the free portion as well. There'll be, an opening session. There'll be classroom sessions, coffee breaks, classroom session, lunch, classroom session, coffee breaks, classroom session, coffee break. Oh, this is the certification. The conference itself will also include welcome and opening remarks. We're going to have a keynote, an opening keynote from Julian Treasure, the sound agency. I don't know much about him, but I'm looking forward to that because Adobe always brings fantastic speakers to come and do the opening keynotes. And from there, we'll break out into the different sessions. This time around, Dr. Pooja Jaising is going to be doing what is new in the latest update of Adobe Captivate. That's going to be a good session. You can't get more of an expert than her, of course. There'll be my session on mobile learning, as I already mentioned. You can see all the details and what you'll learn in this session here. Phil Cowsell will be doing a 2-part Photoshop Essentials segment, so 2 hours on that. And a whole slew of other things. There's Kevin Siegel. He'll be there. He's the author of the Getting Started with Adobe Captivate the Beyond Essentials and the Essentials Adobe Captivate books. And obviously President and Chief Learning Guy from Icon Logic as well. And Debbie Richards is going to be there. There's Phil's second segment. And like I said, a whole slew of other people will be involved in this, including eLearning Joe there, Joe Ganchi. Andrew Vass from eLearning Brothers will be there. And obviously there's more to come as well. Sooner you register, the sooner you can book your seats in these individual sessions and make sure that you've got a seat to see the activities that you want to see. Also, a reminder, of course, don't forget my website at captivateteacher.com. From here, of course, you can see all my videos, various articles, and you can check out how I can help you. So if you're looking for more professional help as opposed to, maybe just answering some basic questions on YouTube, I do offer instruction or consulting on a per hour basis. I do also offer design and development, and I do have a Getting Started with Adobe Captivate course that's available for one or more people. And of course, I can, discuss with you the specifics about this course. For example, if you want it for one person or 5 people, do you want it virtually? Do you want it, do you want me to come to you? Again, that can be arranged, of course. And if you want to ask any questions about any of these services that I offer, you can hit the Contact Paul. Just a reminder, though, of course, I really want to hear from everyone. But, if you got general questions, or you're looking for advice, or you just need to know where the preferences window is, ask those questions on my YouTube channel. But for all other professional inquiries, you can fill out this form, send me a message, and I usually get back to you within a day or so, unless I'm on vacation at the time. Another thing that I do have, of course, is CaptivateTeacher.com Patreon channel, where, if you want to show your support a different way than maybe purchasing learning time, but you appreciate the videos that I do, you can check out patreon.com/PaulWilsonLearning, and you can offer your support there as well. One thing that's new this month, of course, a little bit earlier, maybe towards the end of last month, we got a facelift on the elearning.adobe.com site. A lot of things that are, very different than the way they were before. When you're looking for those questions that people are asking, I find you have to go over to discussions, and you can see a lot of the questions that are coming up. I'm still trying to figure out where everything is. Everything's been kind of moved around. There's some new features and capabilities of the site. At some point, I'll probably do a full review of the e-learning community site. But, the basics are here right across the top. And, of course, your own profile can be accessed from this page as well. So let's go back to webcam and chat here for a moment and just see who's joined us here. Looks like Alexa has joined us, and Courtney as well. Good to see you again, Courtney. It's been a while, I know. I'm not sure how many people are on the live stream right now. I don't have that window open in front of me, but I'm glad to see that I've got a couple supporters here, which is great. So like I said, today we're going to be talking a little bit about troubleshooting fluid box responsive design. So without further ado, I'll switch over to my desktop view here, and we'll take a look. I've got a couple slides that we're going to work on today. And these are actually from a recent presentation I did both at the last e-learning conference in Washington, D.C., and I did a very similar session at the Canadian e-learning conference in Toronto. And we've got some slides here that, at first glance look pretty good, and this is the thing. A lot of people will start designing with, of course, the desktop view. And for the most part, that works. You definitely have something there that looks good. But, when you go to preview this project, and even if you're previewing it here, you might, grab the slider across the top here and slide that across, and that's not really what you had in mind, right? So let's just zoom in a little bit further here. And we'll talk about some of the features of fluid boxes to see if we can figure out what's wrong with these slides. In this example, let's say we were really looking for something to be more or less looking like what we see here. I see a couple of issues right off the bat, but we'll address those one by one. Similarly, we've got this slide here, and this is a click to reveal, where you click on these items down the middle here, and it's going to update the content that's over on the right-hand side. This is a multi-state object, and I can just cycle through those states just to show you, it's a great way to chunk your content, which is really important with mobile design because you don't have the space to put a whole lot of text. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit today as well. This last slide, this is a just a simple multiple choice. The first one was a multiple choice interaction as well. I'm always trying to take my learning away from just pure knowledge and bring it into sort of a scenario realm here. So we have, I could have simply asked, what is the right decision to do when someone is in a wheelchair? But instead, I want to tell a little bit of a story. So, and that's what I've done here. But one of the things that you'll see is as I change this to a mobile design, that's not the layout I had in mind. It's all over the place. And in fact, if you look at the size of the chairs in the background image, she's basically some kind of marionette or something like that. And even my buttons along the bottom don't look right. These multiple choice buttons, looks like I've got one that's too large and two that are in the wrong spot and a whole bunch of different things. So we're going to go through these one by one and see if we can fix these layouts. And hopefully through this process, not only are we troubleshooting these fluid box responsive designs, but you'll start to learn how to set up your fluid boxes to avoid these sorts of pitfalls and get a much more desirable output there. So let's take a look at this. And one of the things that I like to do with fluid box responsive design is let's just give us a little bit of room here. We'll go to 100% here. One of the easiest way to start selecting your fluid boxes, you can either select some blank space in one of the fluid boxes, either here or possibly around the edges of this, and then you'll get into the fluid box view here. Now, I haven't done it in this case, so I'm not really, this is one of those cases where do as I say, don't do as I do. Fortunately for me, I've been using fluid boxes since before they actually came out in Adobe Captivate. But one of the pieces of advice I'll give you right off the bat, and this might be like a key takeaway, is as you're building your fluid box layout, first of all, the fluid box layout should be based on a storyboard. It should not be just randomly thrown together. So, and let me just switch back to webcam view for a moment and just sort of, imagine you're using one such tool could be, say, an iPad or something like this. And you could literally draw, where you want objects to go on your screen, or you can do this on your computer in PowerPoint. And you should get a pretty good idea. In fact, you know what a great tool is that I've been playing around with a little bit? Adobe XD will allow you to design, essentially web pages. And you can pick and choose exactly what the layout's going to be for both desktop and mobile. So a great choice, of course, for Storyboard and Captivate. In fact, a lot of things are very similar in Captivate. Both Captivate and Adobe XD both have properties inspectors, and they both have a stage or canvas, if you will, and there's toolbars that give you the different things like smart shapes and things like that. So they're very similar and they work well together. You really can't transfer your stuff from XD over to Captivate, but it's great if you wanted to build, essentially a storyboard, preliminary visualization, or whatever you want to call it, to give to your stakeholders, to give to your subject matter experts so they can see exactly what it is that you have in mind. So you should always start with that. And that will give you a pretty good idea of what your layout should be. So let's go back here for a second. Let's say this was my idea here. And what do I want to have happen? Well, this is essentially a multiple choice. I've got 3 possible answers. 1 is correct, 2 are distractors. I've got my question stem here. And this particular example, I'm recycling the question stem space and content to be the feedback for whatever selection I'm making here. And the reason I'm doing that is, just remember for a second, we are designing for mobile. So you can't have paragraphs and paragraphs of content if ultimately you're going to be displaying this content on, your mobile phone, whatever device you happen to have. And I'm going to talk a little bit about another feature in Captivate that will really help with troubleshooting as well. But let's go back to the desktop view here again and take a look at this slide here. So if I take a look at these fluid boxes, there's a couple of things that I like to look at right off the bat. So if I go to the topmost layer or topmost parent fluid box, which is your main fluid box, and I select that, we'll see some information down here. We'll see that the content flow is vertical. In other words, I have a fluid box at the top here. I have a large fluid box in the middle here, which actually has been further subdivided, but we'll get into that in a minute. And then I have a third fluid box, which is down here at the bottom. And I've chosen squeeze in a row, which is a good choice for this. The only reason I wouldn't want squeeze in a row is if I was showing this on a really tiny screen and maybe I want my navigation to go to another column. I don't think I would ever do that, so squeeze in a row is probably the only choice I would make here. The content is generally center aligned, so that's selected. I've also selected stretch to fit for both horizontal and vertical. So the content that I'm placing into these fluid boxes, it's going to fill as much space as it possibly can. In fact, I would dare say that my parent level fluid box is set up pretty okay for this particular design. And you can test that just by looking at what happens to those fluid boxes. So the title area is one fluid box. The center content is another fluid box, and the content at the bottom is a third fluid box. And they seem to work well right down to what would be a mobile phone. The problem seems to be with the child level fluid boxes. Now, when I take a look at let's just collapse this down a little bit here. And we'll just take a look. So there's our three initial child level fluid boxes. I'm not doing anything else with the title, and I'm not doing anything else with the bottom one here. I did select space around because I want some spaces between the back and next buttons. I am using stretch to fit, but I put a little padding around it because I don't want it to, exceed the size that I've reserved for it. So I think this would work well. Where we need to focus on is this middle fluid box right here, which has actually been further subdivided initially into two fluid boxes. So we have our content here on the left, and we have a cutout character here on the right. Now, it was always my intention that this cutout character not necessarily be available for mobile view. Because what we really want to see in mobile view is we want to get rid of anything that would be considered optional or just there for aesthetic purposes. So in this case here, let's select that person, that fluid box that contains that person there. And first of all, make sure that optional is selected. And it is. So why isn't she disappearing when I go down to a mobile size? That's the big question a lot of people have. Well, optional content will only disappear if the parent of that fluid box is set for squeeze in a row or squeeze in a column. In this case here, we have wrap to next row. So what's going to happen is when there's not enough to show her to the right and show all this content on the left, she's just going to get plopped down to another row. But we actually need that space for this interaction. So we're going to first of all change the wrap style from from wrap to next row to squeeze in a row. Now let's test this out and see how that works. So she's going to disappear at some point, which is exactly what we expect. And now, of course, we just see our multiple choice question. Perfect. Well, not quite perfect yet. Close. We're getting there. The other thing you might want to choose is to select the absolute parent and then choose at what percentage of the screen size from desktop down to mobile do we want her to disappear at. So you can experiment with this. So if I say 100%, basically, I don't want that. Let's do it this way. If I select 90% and we go here, she disappears almost immediately. Maybe that isn't quite necessary. I'll let you decide for your own projects, but you could choose, let's say, 50%. So when it drops to 50% of the normal screen size, only then will she disappear. So she'll just disappear for mobile phones, basically. I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. Let's say 70%. I think that's fine for this situation. Now, one of the other things I noticed, and this can happen to your project from time to time, is you'll notice that the object where my text stem for the question is squeezing. I'm losing the top and the bottom portion. They're disappearing. And obviously, while text scaling will occur, I'm not taking full advantage of this fluid box here. So let's take a look at that object and see what the problem is there. If you select the object, one of the things I want you to take a look at when you're building something like this is check out Maintain Aspect Ratio. This is going to be found in the Objects Properties Inspector. And the reason that it might be selected is, it's appropriate for things like images or diagrams and things like that. You don't want those to distort. But because I've got text in here, I want it to fill the space as much as possible. So I don't need to maintain the original desktop maintain aspect ratio. I actually want it to fill the space that's available. So I'm going to uncheck that, and you'll see what instantly happens. The item now fills that space, and of course it will use that space to the maximum amount. Now these buttons that I have here, they're actually pictures of these objects, and I've created multi-state objects. They're shapes that have a background image in them, and when you select one of them, if it's a wrong answer, you'll see the word incorrect, and if it's a correct answer, you'll see the word correct in a different color, of course. This works pretty good, but let's take a look here. They're kind of tight against one another. I'd like to have a little bit of space around them, and that's where padding comes into play. So if we want to just add a little bit of space, I'm going to increase this number over here for horizontal. You see how it's adding a little space around them. And I don't probably need it for this view, but you could make the same number of pixels padding for the vertical as well. So let's take a look at what this looks like on a variety of different screen sizes. Looks good, looks good. And actually, I kind of think, in this case here, I have squeeze in a row for this content. But I kind of like the idea of maybe having the third of these objects come down to another row and wrap to next row, so that depending on the layout of the screen, you'll get a few different arrangements here. And maybe it might even be kind of interesting to left align it so that it literally looks like starting a new row. I don't know. I could take that or leave that. That might work for certain mobile phones, keeping them nice and large. But I'll leave that, again, up to you. A lot of these are somewhat subjective, but, I can tell you what works well for me. But I think we've pretty much got this one. This one looks like it's going to work across a wide variety of devices. Keep in mind that when you're in edit mode like I am here, you won't see font scaling. That doesn't happen live. You'd actually have to preview this. And to that point, let's do another thing. Before we move on to other slides, I'm going to do preview and do live preview on devices. And if you haven't played with this feature, I strongly recommend that you do. So this is going to display a QR code, as it's known. And the idea with the QR code is that you can use the camera app in a mobile device and scan this QR code, and it will take you to a live preview of your e-learning project. Now, this will only work if your mobile device is on the same network as your computer that you're doing Adobe Captivate with. So let me switch to webcam view here for a moment. And I'm going to open up my trusty iPad here. It was turned off, so I have to enter my passcode in. And what I need to do here, now for your sakes, I'm going to lower the brightness so that you can see my display quite nicely. And I'm just going to open the camera app. And this would work for an iPhone. I won't do it right now, but it would work with my Samsung phone. I'd have to get a separate QR app, but there's tons of them for free. And so I'm going to just take the camera app and I'm going to point it at that QR code that's on my screen. And you'll see a little pop-up at the top here. And if I select that, it will open that link to my browser and open up that e-learning project right on my screen here. So here it is in landscape view. Looks pretty good, right? Let me move it over here. Looks pretty good. Just trying to make sure I'm not getting too much glare there. And let's see what happens when you're in portrait mode. Also looks pretty good. You know what? I think it's worth doing this on my smartphone as well. But I recommend that when you're designing mobile responsive design e-learning, that, we all have one of these probably. We certainly all have one of these. Have them in front of you. Go to the swap shop. Get an old smartphone. Get a Samsung S3 or something like that for cheap and just use it for testing. And the smaller the better, because then you're pushing the envelope. If you've got I'll give an example. If you've got, let's say, an Apple iPhone SE or an Apple iPhone 5, you can use that. It doesn't need to be activated. It just needs to be on Wi-Fi in your home or in your office. And then you can use that just for testing purposes. So this is a Samsung Galaxy S7, and it's not the largest screen, and it certainly isn't the latest mobile device, but I can certainly use this. I'll probably upgrade. I'm actually eligible to do a hardware upgrade with my service provider, but I'll keep this because this is a good example of what maybe people out there in the real world are using. So let's get this powered up here. I turned it off for the purposes of my live stream. I didn't want it to interfere. But I have, and again, I'll do the same thing here. I'll just lower the brightness down. I have an app on here, and I wouldn't endorse one over the other. They're all about the same there. But if you take a look in the upper right there, QR code reader, just do a search for that in the Google Play Store. I open that up, and it gives me the camera app. I'll point it at there, and it just gives me a little notification that I can browse to that website. So let's take a look at what this project looks like on this device here. So I can actually see I've got a few problems. If my goal is to try to avoid and I should really point it at this side here, these pop-out text icons, which tell me that there's not enough room to display that title notification. So that's something I need to work on. Not crazy about the layout for the three buttons there. So let's go back to our design for a moment. Go back to desktop here. I can minimize this, but don't close this window and keep your devices open because I'll show you a really cool trick here. So let's do something here. Let's first of all select our fluid boxes. It's saying there's not enough room for this title item. Well, I know that there is from left to right, but I think what the issue is the actual height. So I'm going to collapse these down. So we've got our three main fluid boxes. I'm going to select the top one, and I'm going to go to the position panel here, and it's 9.9%. I'm going to bump that up to 12%, just to give this a little more room to work. And we're going to change this layout here. I think I'm going to go back to center align. And maybe we'll go with one row, one column. So it will either be all three beside each other or all three on top of one another. Now, if I go and do preview, live preview on devices here, I don't even need to scan it. Let me switch to my webcam view, and you can see that as soon as I started that, it reloaded the application or the e-learning course. So there's the new look. Notification looks good. I can read all the text. And let's see what happens when I'll just tilt this a little bit here. Sorry for the notifications. I'm going to choose a wrong answer first of all. And so the feedback is here, right? Because that was where my question stem was. I don't have room to have a whole other feedback caption. So I'm recycling the question stem. Now let's try the correct answer. So I need to work on that. That's a little too small. And there's a couple things that you can do for that as well. So let's go back to the desktop view here. And let's consider this. So in our middle fluid box, which contains the question stem and these three answers, I could probably get away with a little less space for my answers. There's space around them, so I don't think I need all that space, but it might be beneficial to give a little bit more room for this text up here. Alternatively, if I click in the scrap area or click on the actual film strip icon, you'll see you have some choices here. Now in this case, enable uniform text scaling. I find that's hit or miss. I find sometimes enabling uniform text scaling can be beneficial if you have, say, 4 or 5 buttons with the same or very similar font information on it. And you want to, of course, be able to select when you resize it, you want the font to be the same size and the same look. That can be useful here. That really isn't going to apply here. The other thing I might want to consider doing, and not always, but sometimes, maybe for mobile phone, I don't need 14-point font. Maybe I can get away with 12-point font. And this is a per slide setting. So your minimum font size and uniform font scaling, you can set this on a per slide basis. So I can have completely different settings for this slide, and then over here have what I've set this for. So I'm going to do a preview, a live preview on devices again. Remember, I don't need to actually switch. What's going to happen as soon as that comes up, it's going to reload the project. So you can just have your device here. That looks pretty good. Let's try getting the right answer again. And again, that text looks very appropriate. There's no pop-out text icon. And of course, I set this up in such a way. Let's reload this so we can see it. see it fresh, and I'll do 2 wrong answers and get the correct answer here. So I'll just, maybe I have to do this again. Hang on. Okay, so we're reloading it again. I'll press the start button there. And so there's my first question. Let's get it wrong. That looks good. Let's get it wrong again. Oops. Everything's mirror for me, so it's a little crazy to follow. That looks wrong. Let's get it right. There's my right answer, and it looks great. A little tight on those buttons, but I'm happy with those. So, and then of course I can click my back or next buttons are along the bottom here. I can click next. And so here's what that second slide looks like when we see it on mobile right now. So it needs some help. So let's go back to our desktop view and see what we can do to fix that, because that does not look good at all. So clearly it looks fine for desktop. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make with a project such as this is that they keep their device, they keep Adobe Captivate in desktop mode, and they design for desktop mode. And while that's important, I always do this secondary. So I will typically have a layout preview that I'm going to use for this, say a Samsung Galaxy S8 as an example. And from here I can work on the layout and see it much more clearly. So really, honestly, design with that particular layout in mind, because you're thinking about your text, you're thinking about the layout, and so on. So let's do a couple of things. Now, we've already learned some things from the first slide. Let's apply those to this one as well. So as you can see, I'm starting off with pretty much the same layout. I've got a title area at the top here. That's the first child level fluid box. I've got some middle content, which will be further subdivided into child level fluid boxes. And then I have my bottom one here. Now you'll notice that my buttons don't look right in the bottom one. And remember, we had some problems with the title. So let's first of all go to the position panel, and I'm going to just go straight ahead and bump this up to 12%, giving me more room for the title. Another possibility is that you could even make something like a title optional. It's a nice to have, but does someone really need to know when they're in the fire evacuation course that this slide is called Evacuation? Or can your question stem, or in this case, the actual items kind of give you that information, through the other text that's there? Something to think about. I'm not going to do that today, but let's fix this bottom box here. As you can see, if we zoom in real close, those buttons are side by side. That's not the layout I was looking for here. So let's select that bottom fluid box and take a look here. Well, here's the problem. We've got wrap to next row, and we really want, in this case here, squeeze in a row. We want them side by side. We want them to fill up the space. And in this case here, space around is a good choice. Try to think about, like originally I used to think, on the left and right would be great because there's more space between. But I like to think about this from the perspective of someone holding their device. I'm not holding my device. If you can see where my thumbs would be, that's not going to be there. It's going to be more likely here, if that makes sense. Same thing with, with my smartphone. I'm not going to be holding it and in fact, it's very likely I'm holding it with one finger, and where's my thumb going to land? Not quite on the edge, but sort of in the middle and to the one side. So something to think about. Think about how someone's going to use this, and a lot of people say, I want it to be in landscape mode. Nobody's taking e-learning like this with their phone. They're holding it like this. Just look around at the world and see how people are using their smartphones. You know, they're using them this way. So I seem to have lost my, but we'll get it back. That's okay. I lost my browser window. So take a look at how people are using your phones. You're thinking about aesthetics. You're thinking about user interface, user experience, right? So design your e-learning to give you that user experience as well. So let's go back to our desktop here. And so I'm going to stick with, in this case here, space around. So there's space here, space here, space here. And that looks pretty good. Now we need to fix the middle because that's a mess. So let's open this up. We have, first of all, this middle content here is set up to wrap to next row. Let me zoom this out a little bit here so we can see what that looks like. I didn't want it to collapse down like this. In fact, I wanted to make sure that this fluid box, and it is set for optional, but it's not going to disappear if it's wrapped to next row. Instead, we need to change that to squeeze in a column. In fact, this we need to change to squeeze in a row. And now that information disappears. And let's go back to desktop for a moment here and just consider this. So here's my instructions at the top here. Very simple. Not a lot of text. Should work well with, of course, with mobile design. So Angela is the optional content. This is going to be what remains. Let's take a look at some of these child level fluid boxes that I've set up here. And again, I'm working from a storyboard. I know exactly what this slide looks like before I start adding fluid boxes. Because if you need to add or delete fluid boxes later, really hard to do. And, I know no qualms about saying that. It's far more difficult to do after the fact to change your layout. So really think about your layout for every single slide. When you're at the storyboard stage, that's what you're doing. So let's take a look here. This is our, and if you're having trouble understanding which fluid box is which, just hover over them and it will highlight. So this is our top one here. Let's do this. We're going to get rid of the wrap. We're going to squeeze in a column. So this will always be on top of one another here. And in this case here, I don't need that to be wrapped to the next row, but it probably doesn't matter. And let's select these two. Again, I don't want this to wrap down. Well, maybe I do. I don't know. No, I think let's keep those. Again, you can experiment with this. But I find squeeze in a row works well for this particular layout. All of our content here doesn't have maintain aspect ratio. And in this case here, what I've done, this is a very simple interaction. I have a multi-state object that includes the content associated with each of those three buttons. And with those three buttons, I have a visited state that kind of looks like what we're talking about. Elevators returning to their home floor, emergency exit signs. So when you click on them, they change from the words to a picture of what's there. So now I don't need to have a picture. Again, I'm recycling my on-screen content so that on a mobile phone, all of this stuff still fits. The only thing I'm really getting rid of on this layout is Angela. Let's do a quick test right here on this mode. We'll shrink that down. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's find out what this looks like on my mobile phone. So we'll do live preview on device once again here. And again, it shows the QR code, but I don't even need that because I scanned it already. And we'll just go to my webcam view. And we'll just bring this up here so you can see it. Oh, there we go. Try to keep it steady. And there's that. And let's go. Again, everything is mirrored, so... Oh, I need to work on that. That's not right. Why is that? Let's go back to our desktop. Troubleshoot. That's what this session's called. Troubleshooting our layouts here in responsive design. So I'm going to look at, it looks fine here, but maybe there's something not quite right here. So let's just, drawing a square from the outside into the scrap area can really help here. So let's just take a look here. Oh, I see. I still have the main parent is wrapped to next row. I need squeeze in a column there as well. And let's try that again. So we'll do live preview on device. A lot of this is trial and error. You can experiment with how things look, and then we'll see what happens here. So I'm going to do this on my smartphone here, and we'll just choose the right answer and go forward. Oh, that doesn't look right either. I'm still struggling. Let's see what I can figure out. What is not right here? So, squeeze in a row. I'll be honest with you, I put my fluid boxes into squeeze in a row far more often than I do squeeze in a column. That's fine. Squeeze in a row. It's this that I seem to be, I see. Again, here's something I've asked for, and if you guys want to put in a feature request with Adobe Captivate, you're certainly welcome to do this. I would love to have the ability to make squeeze in a column or squeeze in a row the default configuration in Adobe Captivate. And if I can't have it the default, here's what I'd love to see as well. In preferences, because again, 9 times out of 10, I'm using squeeze in a row. So if I go in here, down here, maybe have a checkbox, or maybe even like a drop-down selector like this, where you select, default wrap style. And you could choose between, wrap to next column / row, squeeze in a column / row, one row, one column, or symmetrical. And choose one of those to be the default. Because if it, in my world, squeeze in a column is 9 times out of 10 what I choose. Let me make sure this is all set up for squeeze in a column, squeeze in a row. Like I said, I use it more often than not. And there's my bonus tip for this slide is exactly that. So let's try this again. I'm going to bet money, well, not real money, fake Las Vegas money, that this will now work. So again, I'll switch over to my webcam view here. And we'll go to this slide. There we go. So there's my responsive design view here. I'll click the first button. So I get some content I can read. Changes to the picture, the running man, a description of what that's all about, and evacuation gathering point. It even looks like a mobile app, right? And that's what I do. When I design for mobile, I have a design that looks well for, or looks good for your desktop, but have it look like a smartphone app, right? Because that's really kind of what it is. So now we need to work on this last slide. And this is, of course, not too bad, but again, she looks really tiny. There's the foot of a chair, and our button's in the wrong spot. So I think we can apply what we've learned already about troubleshooting fluid box, and we can get that going as well. So let's get rid of this here. And I'm pretty happy with this. Hey, good advice as well. Hit save every time you save your project here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and hit save there. This was done with an earlier version of Captivate. This was done with Captivate 2019 version 1 and then version 2. And now we're on version 3 of 2019, which is, here's a bonus tip for you. If you're running Captivate 2019 right now and you have administrator rights to update your own software, click the help file, check for updates, and what will happen is this little pop-up doodad will show up, and it will check to see if you're running the latest version. And for those of you, if it says no, you're not running the latest version, the version that you should be looking for is 11.5.1.499. And that's going to be the last version, I think, of 2019, and we'll probably be talking about 2020 soon, before we know it. So here we've got some stuff we got to do here. So let's select our fluid boxes again. Let's start off with our parent. I'm going to keep this in mobile view and see what I can do without changing too much here at all. I'm going to go first of all to the position panel. Well, first let's select the first child level fluid box, which is, again, I got title, content, navigation. So this is title up here. I should label it. We found with slide 1 that 9.9 or 10 is not large enough, so we're going to make that 12%. This will shrink down the font, so don't worry that it's cutting it off there, but we want to make sure that we can see at least one line of text. It will shrink it down as it needs to. Let's go back to our properties inspector, and let's make sure that this center content is not wrapped to next row, but rather squeeze in a column. So already that's going to look more appropriate, and it's going to set anything that was optional, i.e. in this case Elena, to disappear at a certain point. In fact, we're pretty much there. Not very much to do here. In the bottom, we need to make this squeeze in a row as well, so that the buttons are side by side, no matter what size screen we're looking at here. That looks pretty good. And in this case here, we've already got some padding, right? So those look like individual buttons. And of course, Elena is set to be optional, or her fluid box is set to be optional. If I only made her optional, she would disappear and the fluid box would remain, which you could do for certain things. But in this case, I want the whole fluid box to disappear, including anything I've placed inside of it. Now, what I do, I look very closely, especially with something like a cutout character. You see the chair just barely behind her, and you see her chair that she uses, it's almost the same size. So it kind of makes sense. The scaling is right. And as I shrink down, she is going to reduce in size once we get there. But, there's a sort of point where it's going to start to look ridiculous. And you want to figure out where that is approximately. I'm pretty happy with that. But you can sort of set that point that she disappears by choosing the wrap percentage. Now I'm selecting the utmost parent fluid box, and maybe what I'll do in this case is go with 80%. So at 80% she'll disappear, because it kind of looked like she was a little too small to be believable in that situation, and that works as well. The other thing you're going to want to look at too, and I should point this out for the other ones here. Let's take a look at Angela. I'm going to select Angela's fluid box here, which I think is this one. The default is going to be middle align and center align for most of your fluid boxes. But I'll show you where you can run into some problems here. As I resize her, let's turn her optional off for a moment, just so we can see her shrink down a bit more. See, the problem is that if she's center aligned, and because I've chosen an image where Angela is just from the waist up, it looks like she's been amputated here, which isn't appropriate. So you're going to want to consider the content that you're placing in fluid boxes and how it aligns to the fluid box. So in this case here, bottom align makes sense. And if you have a cutout character like this, can't really use padding. You can use it on the sides, but if you use it on the top and bottom, again, it's going to look like she's hovering there. So consider that as you're adding content to your optional fluid boxes like Angela here. Same thing would apply to this character. I don't know her name, sorry to say. She's just slide 3 coach. But I do know Elena's here. So even though we're referring to these people with mobile design, I think this is perfectly acceptable. Let's take a look. Let me switch back to my webcam view here and see if I've nailed this one or not. And I think we're probably good, but I like to be sure, of course. So I'm just going to refresh this by going preview live, preview on device. So it doesn't look great right now, but we'll reload it. Hit the play button if I can. It's really hard to do this sideways. I think I messed up this first. Yeah, this was not a good load. Let me try again here. Bear with me a moment. Once I have it working, I shouldn't change anything. Okay, I think I mucked it up. Let's go. While I'm doing this, if you guys have any insight, you know, I know that Alexa probably has some lessons learned. Feel free to put in the chat anything that you've discovered. I'm just sharing you some of my ideas. But, you know, make sure that you share with one another as well, and not just from me, because, of course, I have some good ideas, but I'm not the only person with good ideas. We all have something to contribute to the Adobe Captivate community, and we can't let those articulate guys have all the answers. We got to share with one another as well. I think I figured it out. It goes back to my, let's do this now. It goes back to my squeeze in a column, squeeze in a row issue. Yeah, persons with disabilities is a little small on the screen here, but again, I think that looks pretty good. If I was to go and fix that, we could. We could even actually, one way we can deal with that, and if I switch back here, let me switch back to desktop for a moment and just show you a couple things. This was 14 right here. This was 14 right there. I've changed it to 12. Now, I want to enable uniform text scaling for this slide because, again, I want the text in these 3 buttons to be the same. I don't want one of them to shrink down faster than the other. And this can lead to some complications, but I think we should be okay here. I think what I'll do, though, just to differentiate, I think I'll make this a different font size, and that's all it takes. I'll just make that a little different size here. And let's do another live preview on device and see what we come up with. It still may not be perfect. The title is the challenge, I think, in this case here. So, yeah, I could play with that a little bit more. In fact, let's try. We have the time. Let's go back and select that topmost fluid box. And I'm just going to go to 13 pixels instead of 12, or sorry, 13% instead of 12. And we'll do another preview and see if that makes enough of a difference here. Because I'm willing to give up some of the sizing there because it's fairly small. Oh, still haven't gotten it. Still haven't gotten it. Well, you know, and then there's this this solution that that does come up from time to time. Sorry about that. When we're just looking at the content that we've put on screen here, and we decide that maybe there's just no way I'm going to get persons with disabilities to be that font size. So let's bring it down to that size, maybe. It's ideal, of course, to try and be consistent from slide to slide, but in the end, maybe that's all you need to do. And there we go. So, you know, and again, you see it's almost like an app. The same slide on a tablet might look more like, in this case here, it might look more like, let's just do a fresh scan of that. You know, you certainly could do portrait mode, which totally works. Let's hold this up like so. Sorry for the fingerprints on my tablet. That works. It looks good. But of course, in this mode, I'll probably get the... She's disappeared, unfortunately. But under normal circumstances, she would be there. So then I would get more like the desktop view. And that's hugely important. Alexis pointing something out here as well. She's pointing out that she realized she could only delete fluid boxes in master slide view if that's where they're created. And I'll just switch back to my view here. And so what I've done in a lot of cases, in this example here, I built the basics of these fluid boxes on my master slide so that I could use them over and over again. And let's just return that to desktop view. So these three slides here are all variations on basically the same design. If I'm smart, actually, I'll go in here and permanently change the height of the text to 13. Do the same thing to this one here, and obviously update. That should update my slides automatically, but I may have to do that by hand. Sometimes there's certain things in Captivate that you do on the master slide that you need to reset the master slide to get them to work. Oop, I grabbed the wrong one there. Let's Control Z that, and so I like to design, you know, a handful of master slides. Like here's a slide for my title area. Here are some slides, variations with different backgrounds, but basically it's the same layout. And just to add variety, I've put different backgrounds in all of these. For this particular project, I didn't need actual quiz questions because I was building custom quizzes using just these three slides there. And so that works totally for me. I love putting my palettes into the background like this so that if I need this particular color blue, I can just select that, or gray, or the red here, which I've used throughout this project. And that way they're just easily accessible with the eyedropper tool. So the dictator from the other side of the pod, not sure what you mean there. Form equals from? Yeah, don't know what that's all about, but that's okay. Hopefully someone will understand it. But I try to do this as much as I can on the master slide, so there's less for me to do right here. I can keep things simple, you know, and maybe in the end, I can't have 48 point titles. Maybe in the end, 27 is what I'm going to get. And I've saved these as object styles. So I'm going to save the changes that I've made here so that they're also applied to these slides as well. And I'm constantly previewing. I'm constantly looking at every slide. I don't wait till I have 60 slides, in place to then troubleshoot. I troubleshoot constantly as I go. So, oh, I understand what you're saying. Yes, I know all too well what you're referring to, and we'll just leave it at that. So that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, that's what I really wanted to share with you today. I actually, think and just to kind of leave you with some final thoughts about designing with Fluidbox responsive design. And you'll see this in my Twitter feed. You'll see this on other social media, certainly on YouTube, in the comments and things like that. But right now, if someone says to you, don't worry about responsive design, it only represents 3% of all e-learning that's out there, or it only represents 5% of, 5 is probably on the high side. I'm not going to argue with them and say that's not true, but there are certain aspects that are self-prophesizing, right? If none of you are designing responsive design e-learning, then of course only 3% is going to be out there. The thing that I think is super important is that we need to be competitive as e-learning designer developers. I know I want to be. And so when it comes time to 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, when organizations are demanding, absolutely, this needs to be responsive design, because our people, we just deployed a whole bunch of these things. Oh, it's upside down. Got to get the Apple logo on there, correct? We've given a whole bunch of these to our employees. The salespeople all have iPads. Everyone's taking training out in the field with their smartphones. Big or small, whatever they are, we need to design for that future. And later on, do you want to be part of that small percentage of people that knows how to do responsive design? Or do you want to be one of the old stodgy people, like some people in Europe, for example? Not all people in Europe, just one or two people in Europe. Uh, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. We'll leave it at that. So, I mean, you can be old-fashioned in your belief that all e-learning has to be in exactly this shape here, this rectangle that represents the same size as your laptop screen or whatever. But all that stuff's changing. People aren't using the old computers that they used 10 years ago. And, the younger people who are entering the workforce and want to be on the go, they don't want to be sitting at a computer desk completing training. They want to be, do this on their commute. They want to do this while they're waiting for their bus or their train or whatever it might be. You want to give them the option to kill that training off while they're waiting for something else, because right now it's so difficult to get people to take training as it is, because I think in large part because you have to sit at a computer with a mouse and with a keyboard and do all this stuff when you would rather be outside enjoying the weather or driving home to start your weekend and things like that. So give yourself the competitive edge. I know that's what I'm really working hard to do. I don't know everything about responsive design, but I think I'm probably one of the leading people when it comes to fluid boxes out there. There's a lot of stuff to learn. Are you going to be able to design literally the same courses that you were designing with non-responsive design layouts? No, you have to change some of your habits. You have to change the way you design. Things will be different, but as you adapt or adopt those different styles into your e-learning design, you'll start to see that this actually becomes fairly easy and straightforward. So guys, thanks as always for participating in today's live stream. One dog is down here. That's a question I see someone saying there. Let's see if I can grab the camera and just point it down. There she is. Lucy. Hi, Lucy. Are you a good girl? What are you doing? She's oblivious that she's being broadcast on the internet. Sorry for all the camera movement there, but I thought I would just share little Lucy with you. So again, thanks for participating. Everyone enjoy your week, as Courtney's pointing out. And hopefully I'll see some of you at one of these Adobe Captivate Specialist certifications, like the one in Toronto on September 11th. And hopefully I'll meet some of you at the Adobe Learning Summit in Las Vegas at the beautiful Mirage Hotel with its lava volcano display out front. And of course, if you're a Beatles fan, you definitely want to go to the Mirage, of course, as well. Lots of fun there. Anyway, thanks again, guys. Bye for now. If you thought this video was useful, please share it with your colleagues. If you need help with your next e-learning project, consider hiring me. My focus is to create effective e-learning that helps you achieve your business goals. Visit my website at CaptivateTeacher.com, follow me on Twitter at CaptivateTeacher, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel.